It's that time of year as college basketball takes center stage with the tournament finally upon us. If you're looking to wager this year, BetOnline is the number one spot for all your updated odds and info, along with great contests including the bracket contests where you have a chance to take home the top prize. Head over to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use the promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to get started. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Of course, we're on mute. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Candlestick Kids Fantasy Football Podcast on the Fantasy Focus YouTube channel. I'm your host, Bobby Lamarco. Today, we're here to talk free agency and some breaking news. Deshaun Watson has been traded to the Browns. We're going to break that down, talk about Juju, talk about some other free agent signings today. But more importantly, we're going to talk about my top five. I actually picked six, but don't tell Sky. My top five guys that re-signed and their fantasy impact based on other things that happened in free agency. This is really important. A lot of us get caught up in the big names. A lot of us get caught up in necessarily the changing of the teams. We all get excited about that. But sometimes we need to focus on who's re-signed with these teams and how the other impacting signings and other guys who left the free agency really do impact those players in fantasy football. So let's do a quick breakdown first. Obviously, make sure you're following us across the board on all our social medias at the Candlestick Kids Fantasy Football Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts now on the full app. We do 1 hour shows once a week, and then we do a bunch of video breakdowns right on the Fantasy Focused YouTube channel. You can find all our videos on that YouTube channel. Also, make sure you're on Instagram, TikTok, at the Fantasy Football X Factor for me, at fantasy football _TCK pod for Sky Gawasco and his content. And make sure you're also following Fantasy Focused on Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff at Bobby Lamarco. You get the gist. If you listen to us before, that's where you can find us. Now, let's talk about some breaking news. And if you're watching live on Instagram, thank you for joining. Make sure you hop on over to YouTube. You get all the graphics and stuff that we'll be talking about today. First off, breaking news, Deshaun Watson has been traded to the Browns. And talking through this really quick, and I am excited for this for the Browns. You got Amari Cooper, who, obviously gives Deshaun Watson an alpha number one, a young, talented outside threat in Donovan Peoples-Jones, and then a very young, exciting tight end in David Nijoku. Now, for Watson, obviously changing teams, not ideal. But at the same time, we've seen quarterbacks a la, going to different teams, for example, like Matthew Stafford and Tom Brady, and really kind of hit the ground running. Now, of course, the Rams and the Bucs skill position group was a lot better than what you're going to get in Cleveland, but at the same time, it's an established situation. Kevin Stefanski's been there for a couple years. Amari Cooper's going to be new, but David Nujoku, Harrison Bryant, and Donovan Peoples-Jones, maybe they bring back Landry now. Who knows if Landry wants to come back? But anyway, I think this is important because this is a little bit of a different situation in the sense that his number one receiver is going to be new himself. They're going to have to learn the playbook together. So I think there is a little bit of a learning curve in that sense. So I'm not really ready to anoint the Browns as the potential, let's say, Rams/Bucs of the years prior. So let's get that out of the way. But Amari Cooper's fantasy value skyrockets. Deshaun Watson has shown with DeAndre Hopkins that he is willing to pepper his number one wide receiver with as many targets as he needs. And listen, we've seen Kevin Stefanski from his time in Minnesota. Just because Baker and the Browns recently haven't really had that alpha true number one wide receiver, that doesn't mean it hasn't been done with Kevin Stefanski. We saw it with Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs when he was coaching in Minnesota have big seasons. So I really like this for Amari. Of course, the question comes, where's Amari going to fall in drafts? We'll probably have more of that information in the coming weeks with Best Ball ADP. Now, the next step is who's like the sleepers. Donovan Peoples-Jones, super exciting here because he's going to be a double-digit round pick. but you think the offense should be able to support a second receiver now. Unlike with Baker, you might have more efficiency, better volume with Deshaun Watson. So Donovan Peoples-Jones, if they don't bring in another veteran receiver, becomes very interesting later in drafts. And finally, David Nijoku. I'm actually going to talk about David Nujoku as one of my top 5 re-signed players later, because I actually had this list done before the Watson news today. So it fits right into my narrative about why I'm feeling David Nujoku. We'll break him down in a little bit. So overall, it's just really good news for these skill position players. They're going to bring back a top 5 line. They're going to have the quarterback now to pull the trigger. So it's exciting to see for the Browns. The next one is Juju Smith-Schuster signs with the Chiefs. My quick thoughts on this, I love it. I love it for Juju. This is what the Chiefs needed. The Chiefs have tried Mecole Hardman. They tried to, and I talked about this with the Jarvis Landry situation a couple of days ago. I said I want them to sign Jarvis Landry. Now it'd been my preference, but Juju's fine. That puts Mecole Hardman back on the outside. He can be more of a vertical threat. You let Juju handle the short to intermediate routes, which he's good at. Plus, he plays in the slot, which he's very good at. He can play outside in the slot, just like Tyreek Hill kind of moves all around. You can move Juju all around as well. But he also benefits from the fact that he's not going to be the number one, which everyone wanted to knock Juju for because the AB situation, which I think is bogus anyway, because QB play just plummeted after AB left. It's not even comparing apples to apples. But anyway, from Juju's standpoint, I do love this for his fantasy value. I'm interested to see where he's going to land ADP-wise over the next few months. But I do think he's someone I'm interested in now with Patrick Mahomes. And the last one is more of a sleeper. It's Austin Hooper. The Tennessee Titans are a tight end factory. I mean, for years, they were one of the highest tight end percentage of target teams with Arthur Smith. And then with their tight ends coach was promoted, which is Doyle Loggins. Not Doyle Loggins. Oh, my God. I did this last time, too. I forget the tight end coach. Not them. It's he used to be the OC for the Raiders. I can't remember now off the top of my head. I always say Doyle Loggins because that's like an OC from way back in the day, but it's not. But anyway, the new OC for them, Todd Downing, there you go. Todd Downing, the OC, was the tight ends coach. And this team is dying for playmakers behind A.J. Brown. And last year was a disaster. Julio Jones is now gone behind a guy like A.J. Brown. And this is going to get swept under the rug. There is a boatload of opportunity behind A.J. Brown. And this offense uses the tight end a lot. So look for Austin Hooper to be a potential sleeper in drafts if he as long gets acclimated and kind of, fills that role for them. All right, let's go into it. This is my top 5 re-signings of NFL free agency. So what I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to be breaking down all the re-signed players, my top 5. It's actually 6. I have a bonus one. Don't tell Sky. He's good. Corporate Sky. He's good. Next to I got sanctions and fines, but whatever. But my top 5 re-signed players that I think will impact fantasy the most. Now, I did this in a way where the player themselves coming back along with other factors, players leaving, players coming, is why I picked these guys. And the first guy on my list is Dalton Schultz. Now, Dalton Schultz coming back to the Cowboys along with a guy like, that Michael Gallup with Amari Cooper leaving piqued my interest because Schultz last year was a lot more involved than we thought. He was, he basically led the team in targets. Did not lead the team in targets, but he was basically in the range of targets, 6 targets per game, right in line with guys like Gallup and Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. He was definitely heavily involved. So I wanted to take a look at his splits over the last 2 years when he played with all 3 receivers, meaning Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, and Amari Cooper, versus his splits when they were not, with one of them out or 2 of them out. So over the last 2 seasons, Dalton Schultz played 23 games with all 3 receivers. He averaged 7.7 fantasy points per game in half-point PPR. In the 10 games he played without one of those players, so if Cooper was out, CeeDee Lamb was out, or Michael Gallup, or 2 or 3, those points per game jumped to 10.7. So his points per game in the 10 games with one of those guys missing goes up to 10.7. That's elite tight end. Double-digit fantasy points for tight ends is all you need. That's awesome. So that puts him right smack dab into like the top 8 range for tight ends. His target share didn't go up that much, 15.6 with all 3 to 17.2% without them. But, it's still in the positive direction. Where his fantasy points really come from and where his spike comes is in the red zone. So his red zone target percentage, so his chunk of the targets in the red zone versus everybody else, 14% when all those guys were on the field. That jumps to 18.6% when one of them is out. The craziest part is the touchdowns. He accounts for 13.3% of the red zone touchdowns when all three of those guys played. That jumps to 26.1%. He counted for over 1/4 of the red zone touchdowns when one of those guys missed. So that to me tells me that he's going to be a lot more involved in the red zone with Amari Cooper gone. And I love that for his fantasy value. Now, today his ADP is tight end 8. So he is going in the top 10. People do feel Dalton Schultz, but he's not good. You got to remember with tight end ADP, it's a lot different than running back and wide receiver, because running back, wide receiver, the wide receiver 3 and the wide receiver 4 go probably within a couple picks of each other. The tight end 6 and the tight end 8 might be going 2 rounds apart. So you could get Dalton Schultz, even though he's the tight end 8, probably in the 7th round, 8th round, potentially, versus drafting the tight end 5 in round 5, round 6. So that's the huge part about this. You could get a guy who's going to be a rock solid top 8 option 2 to 3 rounds later, and you could go take a premier wide receiver in those. I'm just going to fix this real quick. Hold on. Yeah, there we go. This is like the whole thing was off. Bad news, right? Let's give me 1 second. Anyway, all right, that was a great break. All right, so anyway, let's jump down to the next guy. My next player is Chris Godwin. And talking about Chris Godwin is, already, if you look at the ADP, before his injury last year, he was the tight end, wide receiver 6 in points per game, averaging 14.6 points per game in half-point PPR. Now, Godwin today is going, early ADP has him at wide receiver 19. Now, I understand there was a lot of doubt about quarterbacks, so I'm sure that's going to rise. But embedded in all this is a lot of guys that are merging, the Jamar Chases of the world. Second year, like CeeDee Lamb now with Amari Cooper gone, Tyreek Hill, bounce back season. So there's a lot of guys getting pushed up draft boards, and Godwin is going to continue to fall outside the top 12. But just keep this in mind. Continuity matters more than anything for receivers. Same quarterback, same coach, same play caller. And he's coming back to a situation with Tom Brady, probably hungry. And last year we saw it. Tight end, he was a wide receiver 6, 14.6 points per game. So take the discount on Godwin. He's probably going to go in the 4th round, 5th round range like he did last year. And the thing is, no one's going to view him as a 2nd round pick or an early 3rd round pick because of the injury, but also because, with Tom Brady coming back and leaving, he suppressed some of his ADP. I don't think he ever gets close to the wide receiver 6 at ADP. So you're going to get him at a discount. That's why I love Chris Godwin, and I brought him up here as one of my top 5 re-signings. Next one is Allen Lazard. And believe it or not, this was before Davante Adams got traded. And now it's even bigger. Because MVS, listen, now without him, the Packers still don't have money. They don't have a boatload of money. MVS, if he comes back, is probably not going to – his best offer is not going to come from Green Bay. It's probably going to come from elsewhere. So Allen Lazard, at least today, looks like he's going to be locked into a big role. Now, there isn't a huge sample size with Allen Lazard playing without Davante Adams, but there was one game, and that one game was magnificent. He went for 146-1 against the Saints, the one game he played without Davante Adams. Now, I'm not saying that's where he's going to be. Of course not. It's not a sustainable pace, but that's what we're seeing. He became de facto number 1 in that offense when there was no Davante Adams. He's also more of that kind of possession type receiver than MVS, who's more vertical. So I think Allen Lazard, this is a huge, huge, huge bump for him, especially because Davante Adams is gone. The other thing is, when Allen Lazard, he never was a full-time player. So I wanted to look at the last 2 years or so, and I wanted to take a look at, when he played like a full-time role. So I use 75% of snaps as the benchmark because that's what he's going to be playing full-time without Adams now gone. He averaged 9.6 points per game in half-point PPR, versus 5.5 in all other games. Now, 9.6 is nothing special. That's wide receiver 4 range. I totally get that. But now you factor in the potential target bump that he gets without Devontae Adams, potentially no MVS. You got to remember, Robert Tonyan's not even re-signed yet either. It's essentially Lazard and Randall Cobb. So that 9.6 points per game is kind of a baseline to understanding when he falls into ADP in drafts. He's probably going to get, so I would say if he ends up being the only guy, which I don't, you got Julio, OBJ out there, a lot of names floating around, of course, MVS obviously, but I just think that your baseline, he's going to probably be at best an 8th, maybe 9th round pick. If the chips fall in place, Allen Lazard knows this offense, and he has been proven time and time again to show that he could perform when he's given the additional opportunity. So I do think that Allen Lazard, we'll see where his ADP lands, but I think this is huge for him. And finally, I just want to bring this up, and I didn't realize this, but Allen Lazard was playing out of his mind last year down the stretch. So when you're looking at Allen Lazard weeks 12 through 18, last year, this is 2021. This is what blew my mind. This is a 6-game sample from week 12 to week 18. He averaged 12 points per game in half-point PPR. That was with Adams on the field. MVS was on the field. They didn't have Tonyan, but where it really gets crazy is he scored 5 total touchdowns over that stretch. So he became like a ball hawk in the red zone. He didn't have big receiving lines, but he had a lot of red zone looks and a lot of red zone touchdowns. So we already have seen it just recently in the last few weeks of the season that that's top 12 points per game and half-point PPR is top 20 numbers. So right there, you're starting to see the opportunity for him to be a mid-range wide receiver 2. I'm not saying he could get to wide receiver 1 necessarily, but you're not going to have to pay a wide receiver 2 premium. That's like 4th, 5th round pick that he's not going to get that high. So I do think that Allen Lazard is someone that's really piqued my interest. We still have a couple more days left of free agency talk, but we'll see where that goes from there. Next guy, David Nijoku. So Nujoku, now with Austin Hooper, like wheels up. With Deshaun Watson now gone, David Nijoku now, it's like, all right, it's the hot name. This whole thing, I had him in here before Deshaun Watson was signed. But a lot of it has to do with Austin Hooper's now gone and the focus that the Browns have on their tight ends. They have been known to use a lot of 2, in some cases 3 tight end sets. They have a feature of this offense with Kevin Stefanski, the featured tight ends. And they went in on Nujoku. They did not go in on Hooper. They released Hooper. Hooper's now with the Titans, so he's not coming back. And now with Harrison Bryant in his 2nd year or 3rd year, I can't remember off the top of my head, but Nujoku really piques my interest. But now you throw in Deshaun Watson. I don't know where his ADP is going to go, but this is a guy that I'm going to take a flyer on every chance I get. The offense, number 1, same coach, same scheme, loves tight ends. The quarterback, Deshaun Watson, the target rates in 2018, 19.3% of his targets went to tight ends. 2019, 20.5%. 2020, 19%. And can you name a Texans tight end that was dominant over that stretch? No. So he's throwing to like Darren Fells, Jordan Akins, and he's giving guys like that 20% of his targets. Now you give him a guy like David Nijoku. That's insane. So I think because of the quarterback play, because of the opportunity that he's going to get now with no Austin Hooper. Now let's talk about this for a second. We've seen him without Austin Hooper. There's 3 games where the Browns played. There was technically 4. One of them was the Raiders game where there was like 35-mile-an-hour winds. So let's just, I gave him a pass. But in the 3 games that he actually played where they actually threw the ball, he averaged 8.8 points per game without Austin Hooper. That would have been tight end 11 in 2021. So we've already seen when Hooper wasn't on the field, he's putting up nearly 9 points per game with Baker Mayfield. And I just think that, look out. Like this is a guy with a 1st-round pedigree, bunch of athletic talent in an offense that he knows with a dominant quarterback now. So Nujoku is someone that we should all be aware of heading into draft season in 2022. All right, I'm going to take a quick commercial break for one of our sponsors, Cara Factor. We'll be back right after this.
Hey, TCK Potters and Fantasy Focus community. Are you looking for options for hair loss? There are many options out there for treating it. However, most products treat the cause, such as DHT, and don't do much to support the growth of new and stronger hair. It's like removing harmful weeds from your lawn, but not doing much to fertilize the grass. That's why the Fantasy Focus and TCK team has partnered with CaraFactor. CaraFactor saw this problem and focused their research on finding just the right combination of biosynthetic growth factors and an innovative delivery system to promote fuller, stronger looking hair. So whether you're a listener who suffers from various forms of alopecia or even stress-related hair loss, the CaraFactor treatment is the perfect scalp-friendly solution that can help and influence stronger and healthy hair throughout all stages of the hair life cycle. And now, exclusively for TCK listeners, use the promo code TCK at checkout to get 15% off all products at shop.mycarafactor.com. That's shop.mykerafactor.com. CaraFactor, skincare for hair.
All right, folks. Sorry about that. Yeah, this is the Bluetooth's all messed up here. We're struggling. We're struggling today. Anyway, let's get back to it. Headphones. This has been just a doozy of a day. Let's just check some real quick.
It's that time of year.
I don't know. All right, I don't even know. Headphones are all out of whack today. That's all right. We're going Cavalier. It's Friday. Hopefully you all can hear me. Whatever. All right, let's talk about Alley-Cox. Now, Alley-Cox, he... Sorry, I'm struggling here for a second. Just give me 1 second, folks. Give me 1 second here. Okay. Anyway, so Alley-Cox, let's talk about this real quick. Doors open. I'm just a hot mess. Hot mess today. Actually, I'm gonna leave it open. Keep things cool. Whatever. You know, I'm just going. We're not even repurposing it on the podcast side. If you're watching the video, good for you later. Anyway, Alley-Cox, Indianapolis Colts. First off, he gets re-signed by the Colts. Great news. They don't have a quarterback. We're not sure, but it sounds like they're going to be in on Baker. They're going to be in on Jimmy G. If it's one of those two guys, talk about love and throwing to your tight ends. I mean, look at George Kittle did with Jimmy G. Look at what the Browns had like a top 5 target percentage to tight ends with Baker. So I'm not sweating it. But look, Jack Doyle retires this year. The Colts haven't really done much all of free agency yet. They bring back Alley-Cox. They do have Kylan Granson. Kylan. Yeah, it's another rookie tight end. But it looks like Alley-Cox really has a chance here. So when you see Jack Doyle retires, it doesn't sound like a big deal. But first of all, when you're looking at a guy like Frank Wright, I mean, Frank Wright was OC early Hunter Henry years when he had a big double-digit touchdown season, Antonio Gates with the Chargers, and then more recently he had, the Eagles. He was with Doug Peterson, with Zach Ertz and those guys. So there's been plenty of opportunities to see where tight ends are featured in this offense in the passing game. Now, without Jack Doyle, there isn't a lot of stats for Alley-Cox. But the key here is he played 66% of the snaps. Now, in the 2 games without Doyle, that's huge because he's usually 1/3 of the snaps when Doyle and him, and it was Trey Burton, and then last year was Kylan Grayson. So when he played, he got on the field. So in the 2 games without Doyle, he had a 5 for a 111 and a 3 for 19 game. Now, a 319, I totally get it, not great. But the 5 for 111 is, a 100-yard receiving game from a tight end should not be completely ignored. But the other key factor here is that 66% threshold. So in those 2 games, he played 66% of the snaps. Now, in the 5 games in his career that he played at least 66% of the snaps, he averages 8 points per game in half-point PPR because he's a good receiving asset. So if he's going to be on the field, this is another guy that I like later in rounds that could be a sleeper. But we have to continue to monitor what happens the rest of, obviously, free agency, which quarterback the Colts get. But don't forget about Alley-Cox. And my 6th and final bonus one is James Conner. Okay, Conner has had a little bit of an up and down road. Showed flashes with the Pittsburgh Steelers, then has a disastrous season with them. Now, Conner is not going to be viewed as a top 5 to 8 running back. But now with Chase Edmonds gone, we have to take a deeper look and understand what is his upside? Because he was an absolute dominant force in the games he was a workhorse. Now, I know he's had injury history. And I know he got banged up a little bit last year and missed a game or two. But if you could get elite usage from a guy for 12 to 13 games, I will throw in my RB3/4 for 2 to 3 of those games and be fine. But okay, so he was the RB5 in fantasy, RB6 in points per game and half-point PPR. But when you actually break out the games with Chase Edmonds and without Chase Edmonds, here's the breakdown. 9 games with Edmonds, he averaged 12.1 touches per game. In the 6 games without, that jumps to 21.7. His total yards, 51.3 in the 9 games with Edmonds, 110.8 total yards in the 6 games without. Touchdowns, 0.9 touchdowns per game with Edmonds, 1.7 without. His points per game, 10.9 points per game with Edmonds, 23.6 points per game in half-point PPR without. 23.6 points per game is higher than Derrick Henry was last year, better than Dalvin Cook and Alvin Kamara in 2020. So we're not just talking, low-end RB1. We're talking league-winning numbers when he was not with Chase Edmonds last year. Now, that's where we have to view his potential in the games that he plays. So whether it's 12, 13, 14 games in the 17-game season he plays, there's not a lot of guys that we can point to in fantasy football right now in their current situations that can average 23.6 points per game. You can count maybe on one hand. That's it. And his ADP is buried right now. So if you go to Best Ball ADP, his ADP is in round 5-6. Now that's going to rise. Of course it's going to rise. But it will never get to RB 5-6 levels. It will never get to 23.6 running back potential levels. Because that's top 5 to 8 ADP. At best, this guy will probably get closer to the 2-3 turn. Do not forget about James Conner. Don't forget about the potential he had and what he has already shown in this offense. Plus, the Cardinals, they did not bring back Chase Edmonds. He's gone. Who's going to be the backup to take some of that work to Chase Edmonds' role? It ain't going to happen. So it's going to be James Conner, and they're going to ride him and hope for the best because I think that this guy is someone we should not forget about in fantasy football drafts 2022. All right, folks, that's it. Those are my top 5/6 top re-signed players for 2022. Once again, this is the Candlestick Kids Fantasy Football Podcast on the Fantasy Focus YouTube channel. I'm your host, Bobby Lamarco. Make sure you're following us on all our socials across the board, Instagram, TikTok, at the Candlestick Kids, at Fantasy Football X Factor, at Fantasy Focus. You can find us everywhere you are looking for content. TikTok is hot right now, folks. Breaking news like crazy. So make sure you're joining me on there as well. Once again, I'm Bobby Lamarco. Thank you for joining me again. This is Friday, March 18th. I hope the Browns fans are celebrating this weekend. I'm proud of all of you. Once again, I'm out of here.